so quick to walk away. That's me. I wanna rock you.
Hello y'all, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're gonna go ahead and talk about toxic jobs, specifically the toxic jobs that I've experienced. And I recently just got out of one yesterday, and I went in to grab my stuff today, so I'm gonna talk about that too. But all week I've been on this weird emotional roller coaster about my whole job, and I'm like, I need to quit. And so I ended up quitting finally and finding another job. So my idea today was to talk about my overall job experiences. I was / kind of am still a job hopper, but if I don't feel right or comfortable in an environment that I'm in, I just try to find something else and try to dip until I find the perfect environment. And I'm also a super emotional person too. Deep down, like, I really am, but like if I'm close to someone, I express it a lot more around them. But yeah, but overall, I'm gonna talk about my horrible job experiences. Yeah, let's get into the video. First job I had was a fast food chain restaurant where people are on roller skates and they deliver food, even though like the place that I was, like the specific restaurant I was at, they didn't have roller skates, or they didn't do that, so I didn't have to do that. I was 16 at that job, and if I keep looking down right here, it's because I have my notes. Look at this. Anyway, so if I'm looking down over here, it's because I'm going back and making sure I'm on topic, because I have a habit of this and that and like going off topic, just like I am now. See? Okay, anyway, so I started working at when I was 16, and my mom at the time really wanted me to get a job because she said I was getting too expensive, because I was into like makeup already, Victoria's Secrets and hair stuff, clothes. Like I was always wanting something. So my mom's like, oh well, you're 16 now, you could get a job. So I'm like, girl, say less, because if I want something, I don't have to wait on you to let me know when I could get it. I could just splurge, spend my money, and I'll be set. So I was excited to get a job. So I was just like, you know what, I think could be a good place to work. Like it seems easy. So yeah, I got hired there. The whole interview thing, they only asked me like a few questions, and then they hired me on the spot. So I was like, hey, I'm excited. Before my first day started, they told me my uniform just needs to be like dark black pants, shorts or whatever, and yeah, we'll supply the shirts. And so I'm like, okay, I bet. So I go in with just like dark pants. They give me a hat, and then they also give me some, like, they give me a t-shirt. The t-shirt was super nasty. It smelled like mildew. I was like, I don't want to be walking around smelling like booty on my first day. So I'm like, what the heck? And that was the only shirt that they had, so they gave it to me, and I was just like, the heck? So that was red flag number one of that job. So I was like, And then the employees too, I walked in, and they had, like, the manager introduced me to everybody, and they're all just like, hey. And I'm like, why y'all acting so bougie up in here? Like, come, why? So I was just like, okay, that's another red flag, because I already don't like the people up in here. Like, the vibe was ugly. So I was just like, I ain't gonna like it here. And I already knew, so yeah, it was terrible. And so while I'm there, they're like training me and everything on how to like receive orders and go out there and be a car hop and all that mess. So I'm like, okay, cool. See, it was easy. So while I'm there, it was super dead that day, or it was super dry that day, because it was about to rain. So nobody was really out there getting like drinks or anything or food there at that time I was there. So it was a really relaxed day. So they're just pretty much showing me around and training me on everything. And while they're doing that, there's like a guy that's my same age at the time, and he's okay. So how it was set up back there's a whole soda fountain area that we like have to like, you know, like get the soda put in the cups, and we have like a whole like bin of ice that we scoop out, and they have really good ice, but they have like a whole bin of ice that we just scoop out and throw in the cup. Well, the whole time they're showing me around, the guy's dipping his fingers and eating the ice, and I was just like, that's nasty. He ain't got no gloves on. And after he's picking up the ice with his bare fingers, I'm sure they're dirty, his bare fingers, he's dipping his fingers in the ice, eating it, putting it in his mouth, and dipping it back in. So I'm like, and my parents and I come here all the time to get happy hour drinks, and you over here, that's nasty. So I was just like, So red flag number 3, I shouldn't walk out as soon as I saw that, but I didn't. I was trying to like stick it out and stuff. So I saw that, and I was just like, what the heck? So this guy that was my age was working there too, and he was walking around and like trying to make jokes with everybody and stuff, and I'm just standing there like, okay. And after the jokes, that they weren't even funny, he was just like being dumb. So he was just acting a fool and stuff. But then he's over here calling all these other coworkers the N-word, and I'm like, boy, you Caucasian, you ain't got no right to be saying the N-word. So I felt uncomfortable about that because I was like, ew, I don't like that. So I was just like, ugh. So that was red flag, what, number 4? Number 5. I think it was number 4. So red flag number 4. I was just like, I don't like that. That's weird. We had to wear a waist apron. And so he was over there walking around with the apron like all heavy and like dragging down. I'm like, what's this, man? What the hell? And so he's just like, oh my God, it's so heavy. And then. So he comes up to me. He's like, hey, you should hold it, carry it, see how heavy it is. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, what? Like, ugh. I was just like, no, thank you. But deep down, I'm like, the hell? And so then I was just confused the whole time. So I'm just like, what the heck? So he's still acting a fool and going around like, oh, my apron's heavy, my apron's heavy. And he's like, look. And he goes and he shows our main manager, which the managers there were maybe in their like early 30s, late 20s. And so one of the managers was a girl and she was just like, oh my God, so-and-so, what's in there? Like, why is it so heavy? Like, she was... So she's just questioning it. And so then he's like, oh, look. So he opens it and she looks, she's like, oh my God, why do you have so many of those? Like, what the heck? Who bought those for you? Aren't you 16? Aren't you a minor? And I'm thinking like, what's in them? And later on he pulls it out. It's a little shooter bottle. And I'm like, what the heck? And so he opens it up and shows everybody. And his whole apron is full of different types of alcohol, but like different types of shooters in there. And I'm just like, what kind of place am I working for? What the? I was like, So I was just like, what the heck? And so then he was walking around all laughing and stuff. And all the other coworkers like, ooh, you got shooters. And I'm like, in the back, just like, I want to leave. I want to get out. And so he's walking around with the shooters and like showing everybody. And as like the shift went on, every time I would glance over at him, he's all drinking them. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this man. And so the managers aren't even saying anything. They think it's funny and they're laughing about it. And I'm like, oh, what the heck? I was just like, So I felt super uncomfortable because of that, because they're allowing a 16-year-old dude do that on the job. So I was just like, if they're gonna let this slide, ain't no telling what could happen, and they're not gonna say anything, or they're just gonna, act like nothing happened. So I was just like, I don't like it here. So I'm gonna just work today and then I'm out. And so I ended up finishing my day, but then the next day I quit. But that whole night I remember telling my mom about it. And I'm like, Mom, I just don't feel comfortable. And she's just like, why? It's your first job. You don't want to work? You don't want to work? I'm like, no, girls, that's not why. It's just because they're acting a fool. And I don't want something to go down to where I'm held accountable because I'm guilty by association if something goes down. Like, I don't want to be put in that situation. So I told her everything, and she's just like, oh yeah, you need to get out of there. That's such a toxic work environment. You need to get out. Or I ended up getting my shirt. After I talked to my mom, I went and I was like, you know what? I should at least, like, I'm gonna give them the shirt back, but I'm gonna wash it because this thing stinks. Because it stunk the whole day. It was nasty. So I go and I wash it, took it out, put it in the dryer. And I took it out the dryer. I'm like, it's gonna smell good because I put some really good detergent in it and a hella dry sheets in it to make sure it smells good. That thing still stunk. So I was just like, you know what? I don't care anymore. So the next day my mom drove me to, and I gave them the shirt back. I told them I quit. They asked me why, and I told them everything. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. And it was the manager that had worked that shift. So then I was just like, okay. My mom's like, oh, you didn't ask to speak with the store manager of the restaurant? And I'm like, no, because he was there. I was like, no. And she's just like, okay, hold on. So we go and we pull through the drive-thru. She's like, yes, can I please speak to your main manager? And so they're like, oh, yes, ma'am. And so then they go and they pull to the store manager. My mom laid out everything, and that guy was so mad, and I was just like, oh, okay. And then we drove off, and I don't know what happened. I know, like, within time I didn't see the same people, but I don't know what happened to them folks. But yeah, so that was my first job ever, and it was just super bad. And also going back to my first job, that was the summer of 2016, so I was 16 years old. So again, this is like my first time ever getting a job or anything. So I was just trying to figure out if I want to do fast food, if I want to do retail, or like what do I want to do. So, and also like there is super, like in the area that I was in, it was kind of limited on like what places I could work, and majority of the places I could work was fast food. And later on I realized like fast food is such hard work, super hard work, and I'm like, I cannot keep up. I'm not that much of a, I'm not that bad of a baddie to be working in fast food, because fast food is hard. Anyways, so that was my first job ever. My second job was at a place that makes wings, and they're known for their ranch. I worked there for 2 weeks. And again, it was another toxic workplace, and I'm like, mm-mm. So in the beginning of that place, I had a whole interview. Same thing like the last place. They hired me on the spot. My first day was super laid back. They're just training me on everything. I was mostly on the computer, so I didn't really do too much. And later on, after I finished my computer work, they ended up having me be at the end of the line, and they wanted me to like put a whole bunch of like vegetables like celery and carrots in like a little tray, and then like bag up like people's online orders or over the phone orders and put them in on the wall to where like people could come and pick them up. So that was my job. It was super easy. And then later on, they had me working at the registers, which I did not like because it would get packed, and I'd be like, what do you want? And like it was bad. And so I would get overwhelmed super fast, and I was just like, I can't keep up, y'all. And then like their orders would be messed up. Yeah, it was bad. I was a bad employee there. Like I couldn't keep up. There was this one manager, which he was like maybe a few years older than me. I think he was like 18. And already in the beginning he was super nice, but he was kind of more of a big flirt. And so he would try to flirt and stuff, but I wouldn't like laugh or anything like that. I'd be like, oh, okay. Like super short, because I'm like, I'm not there for that. And plus you're like an adult at this point. Like you ain't got no business trying to talk to a 16-year-old. So I was just like, And I've already experienced, like in the last video, I've experienced older aged boys, and I dated them and it never flew by. So I was scarred from that. I was super scarred from that. So I was just like, And so yeah, so he was trying to be a big flirt, and I was just like, I wouldn't acknowledge it, and he would get kind of butthurt, so he left me alone a little bit. But one day on my shift, I was at the end of the line again, putting all the orders together because they didn't want me at registers because I messed up too much. So I was at the end of the line and putting bags and stuff together, and that manager that I talked about that was being a big flirt, again, like I told you, he was kind of like distancing himself from me again because I wasn't acknowledging him that much. So he was just like kind of being like ugly a little bit towards me. But there's this one time where I was at the end of the line bagging everything because they removed me from the registers because I messed up too much. So they put me in the bagging area again, and the area where I was standing and like the wall to go, or there was a wall behind me, but it wasn't too far from me. It was enough room for people to go back and forth from like the back of the cooking area to like the register area in the front. And so he would walk past back and forth just fine. But then like there's a moment where I was like still bagging, like my back is faced towards the people that are walking past. But this guy tried to be nasty, and I'm sitting there bagging stuff, and he goes and acts like there's like someone behind him or something, and he like pushes his area against my booty, and I turned around so fast, I'm like, that's nasty. And so he looked at me, he was like, what? And I'm like, why would you do that? That's disgusting. And he was just like, oh, I didn't do nothing. And so our main manager was there, and she's like, what's going on? So I was like, he like pushed up against me, like, what the heck? And he's like, oh, it's because it was so tight of an area. And so the manager is just like, no, there's a gap between that wall and Felicity, and Felicity's not even taking that much room up. So I don't know, like what, like she got onto him a little bit, but then left it at that. She didn't report it, nothing. So I was just like, weird. But yeah, and then after that day, he would start kind of picking on me because I called him out on that. There's one day where I noticed that he was the one that was messing up, because this whole week that this man had changed up my schedule, he changed it and nobody called out. So I'm just like, that don't make no sense. This was on a Wednesday. I was supposed to go into work at 4 o'clock, and I saw it on Monday. So I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm on my schedule. I screenshotted it and I left it at that. So we have a whole schedule in the back of our break room. So we had a whole big old calendar where it shows like who's coming in at what time and all that mess. So I was like, oh, okay, I don't really need to check on it that often because, you know, I took a screenshot and it doesn't change that much. So I'm like, it's fine, I'm gonna come in at the same time, like whatever. So they sent us a text message of the schedule, so I just screenshotted it, and then I'm like, okay, whatever. And so on a Wednesday, I was just like, oh, okay, I don't go until 4 and I don't leave till 10, so that's fine. So on Wednesday, I had went in at 4 o'clock, and so then my main, like the boss was just like, Felicity, why are you late? And I'm like, I'm not late, I'm scheduled to like at 4. And they're like, no, your schedule says 2. I was like, what? And so then I go back into the break room, and sure enough, that guy kept changing my schedule, and he changed it for the rest of the week, and nobody called out, nobody requested anything or nothing like that. So I'm just like, why is he changing it? So I had to go and I had to show the main boss like my schedule like before, or like what I screenshotted, and he was just like, oh, that's weird, I don't know why they're changing it. And I'm like, well, I don't know either, but So he was trying to play me and get me in trouble. I felt like, again, like he was kind of aiming towards me and like taking out his like ugliness on me. And I ended up going and confiding into like one of the managers above him and telling him like, hey, you know, like I have a complaint against so and so because of this and that. And I gave him a whole list of reasons of like what's been going on. They're like, oh, well, you know, like I understand like he could be frustrating and stuff, but you do know that he's quitting soon, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And they're like, yeah, he's quitting soon, so I think it'll be okay, like it'll be fine, you just have to tolerate him for a few weeks. And I was like, well, actually I also wanted to talk to you and ask to see if it was possible if I don't be scheduled with him, or if I was just gonna ask to see if it's okay if I'm not on the schedule with him, like I work opposite hours that he does. And they're like, it's gonna be a little bit hard to like kind of like for you to avoid him or like try to change up the schedule, because there's always gonna be a time where y'all are gonna be in the same area. And I'm like, yeah, I understand, but I just don't want to work a full shift with him, so if I'm around him for like an hour or two, then it's okay. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. They never listened to me, so they kept the schedule the same. I always worked the same hours that he did, or I always worked the same shift that he did. So I'm just like, you know what, I'm gonna just quit. So I quit after maybe like a month and a half of being there, because I was just like, I don't want to be around all this mess. So yeah, so that was my second job that summer of 2016. And yeah, so fast food, I felt like at that point was not my place at all. And then now we're gonna jump 4 years into my life to when I'm 20. I used to be an avid tutor, so I'd help like tutor kids in middle school Tuesdays and Thursdays and do TRFs and stuff. And I was like, oh, you know, I actually like being in the school, like working alongside teachers and stuff, but also like I feel like I want to get paid a little bit more, because they didn't really pay too much as an avid tutor. So I was like, I could just be a substitute, like that's so much easier. It's the same job pretty much, but a little bit more pay, but it's more consistent, and I can work more days instead of just 2 days out of the week. So I ended up becoming a substitute teacher, and I'm like, oh, I'll just go ahead and sub at the place that I used to tutor at, which was a middle school. So I was like, yeah, you know, the kids that I tutored weren't bad, so I'm sure it's gonna be good at, you know, same middle school. Girl, it was not. It was bad. So on maybe like my first week there, they had me watching the ISS kids, which is the in-school suspension kids. And the whole time I was there, I was just like, oh my god, these kids are crazy, because like they would stand up on the desk and like dance and stuff. I'm like, sit down, whatever. So they would sit down, and then later on they'd be like, or there's like maybe only like 5 kids in that classroom. And so there would be kids like standing up on desk and like making jokes all loud and stuff, and I'd be like, hey, no, and I would tell them like to stop, and they'd listen. But they would like try to test me and push me, and I'd be more stern with them, and they'd be like, oh, okay, so she ain't playing, whatever. So then they cooled down a little bit. But then further on the day, one of the kids was just like, miss, my back hurts and my neck hurts, I need to go to the nurse's office, like I need to go bad. And I'm like, well, what's wrong? And he's like, I'm just sore. And then 3 other boys were like, yeah, me too, miss, and me too. So they wanted to go. I feel like they pretty much wanted to go and like roam the hallways and stuff. So I'm just like, let me call the principal to see if like y'all are able to go, or maybe he could walk y'all to the nurse's office. And they're like, no, never mind, miss, I'm fine, I feel better. So I'm just like, oh yeah, y'all lied, whatever. And so then when the girl, or there's a little girl that was in ISS as well, and I used to tutor her in that AVID class, and she was just like, yeah, miss, like those boys are bad. And I'm like, why? And she's like, well, you know why they're in here, right? And I'm like, no. And she's just like, well, miss, they stole so-and-so's car. I was like, what? They're like, yeah, they stole Mr. so-and-so's car. I was like, oh my goodness. And so she was like, yeah, because one day Mr. so-and-so had asked if one of the kids that was in the class, like one of the boys, so let's say like boy number 1, so he had asked boy number 1 to go into his car and grab a few things and then bring it back into the classroom. So the teacher gave the boy number 1 the keys. So he was like, yeah, for sure, mister, I got you. So he gets the keys, and he has like, he's posting on his Snapchat like, hey, guess who has so-and-so's car, who wants to go cruising with me, whatever. And so then boy number 1 and like the other boys, I guess the other boys have seen it, and they're like, yeah, let's go. So they ended up going into the car, and boy number 1 decides to drive across the street to a Family Dollar, and they steal candy. They jump back into the car and they book it back to the school, but they felt like somebody was following them because there was a car kind of like behind them. So they got scared, and I guess they're driving so fast where there's like kind of like a ditch in front of the school. Boy number 1 had hit the ditch super hard to where the bumper of the car fell off. And the parents got tickets, I think, for the situation and stuff. And then the boys, all they got was in school suspension for a week. And I'm like, dang, that's crazy. You would think that they'd have like suspension for like a few days at home, but I don't know. I guess the school just, I don't know. I don't know why I don't know. They should have been out. I don't know. And so, yeah. So I was just like, dang, that's crazy. And then she was like, also, miss, those boys are also in a gang with the other high schools here. And I was like, high schools? I'm like, this is a middle school. And she's like, yeah, like they're in a gang. And I'm like, oh my goodness. These boys were maybe like 13, 14, like in that area or in that age range. And I'm just like, oh my God, they're bold. I'm like, dang, that's crazy. So then after that day, I didn't want to be a sub anymore because that school was kind of I didn't want to sub for that school specifically anymore because they'd always want to put me in the ISS like kid group. And most of them were super, super nice and sweet, and they'd only get in trouble for not turning in work or like missing so many days or whatever. But I'm just like, no, like I'd rather like sit down in a classroom. So I ended up going and subbing for my high school that I graduated from, and that place was so much better. But yeah, so that was like a toxic, I guess, work situation I had, but also like, I don't know, I just thought it was crazy. So yeah, so 2020, I was a substitute, and I pretty much subbed for ISS kids until I went to the high school and subbed. So yeah. So going back in 2020, this was after the pandemic was like first announced. So this was maybe a few months after where it was somewhat controlled. So the time that I subbed was around October. And so then I was just like, oh yeah, you know. So yeah, this was around September that I was working for the schools. And I was also starting to work at a place that makes you smell good. It's a place that makes you smell good, and they have a lot of cute stuff in there and good candles, and yeah. So I used to work there at this place that same year, and in the beginning it was pretty cool. Like the hiring process was cool. The store manager seemed like she was cool, so everything was, I felt like everything was gonna be okay. And so whenever I first started, the scheduling was kind of weird because my first week there I only worked for one day. And then I was like, what the heck? And they're like, oh, we base our scheduling on how much we make for the week and this and that, which is most retail places. But at the time I didn't know that. So I was just like, oh, so we got to hustle to get money, or we have to hustle to sell just in order to get hours. I'm like, that's crazy. But I guess that's just how it worked over there. So the store manager was pretty cool in the beginning, but then like later on, there would be other girls working and stuff, but she always wanted to be the main attention. So the girl would be like, oh my gosh, so-and-so. Oh yeah, they'd be like, oh my gosh, so-and-so, look, I got my nails done. And so the store manager would be like, oh my gosh, girl, that's so cute, but also you should have seen the nails I got. Like kind of like trying to one up them a little bit, or I don't know, she was always like trying to like stand out or not be above someone, but like she was always trying to like one up somebody in any story. So I was just like, like, I guess it's just how it is. And I didn't really get like too chummy with her. So I was just like she would talk to me and stuff, and I'd be like super short. But yeah, I just left it at that. And yeah, so she was a little attention hoochie. And then while I was there, she would always like tell us over like because we had to wear like these walkie-talkie things. She'd be like, oh, Felicity, try to sell 10 candles today, and then I'd only be able to sell like 3 or 4 because I was just like, boy, if they don't want to buy the candle, I ain't gonna force them to like shove a candle down their throat in order to buy. Like, what the heck? I'm like, I'm not like that. And you know, like I don't feel comfortable like bugging, and like I always avoid people like that. And I'm like, no, like I don't. Because especially in that place, like you'll be walking around and like you're only in there for like 2 seconds, and they're like, are you doing okay, man? Are you doing okay? You need to back it in. And I'm like, dang, girl, I can't just like sniff a little perfume and walk around for like maybe like 3 more minutes. You over here up under me bugging me, and like So I was just like, no, I don't want to be one of those employees here, because I don't know, I'm not like that. I don't like doing that. So yeah, so she was just like, Felicity, you need to sell 10 candles by this time, and I only sell like 4. And so later on, she ended up having me, so later on, she also, since I wasn't making goal, my hours were cut even more, so I only would work like, and like, oh my god. So I wouldn't really sell that much, so every time I would come in for my shift, they'd have me in the front handing out bags for customers to come in and like fill up their bag and take it to the register and pay for it. So I was just there just greeting people like, hello, would you like a bag? Hello, would you like a bag? Just the whole entire shift. So I was just like, oh, okay, this is easy. And so one time while I was working the front, I was handing out bags, and I had my Apple Watch at the time, so I was texting. I was just like, I was texting like my friends and stuff. And so I wasn't paying attention. I was also talking to one of my coworkers, and while I'm talking to her, all I hear is Felicity, and I was like, who said my name? And so I look over, and it's my aunt that I haven't seen since I was like 9, and I was like, oh my god. And so like I was super excited to see her, so I go up to her and I give her a big old hug, and we're both like sitting there hugging each other, crying. And it was kind of like a big scene, but not really, because the only people who really like saw that whole interaction was all the employees, because it was a slow day and all of them were up in the front area. So we were like, oh my god, like hugging each other, like how are you? So, and my aunt was like, oh my god, like I can't believe I can't believe you're, oh my god, I can't talk. But she was just like, oh my gosh, like, you're so beautiful. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe, like, we've seen each other, like, how are you? And just, like, kind of catching up and stuff while we're both crying, because it's been, like, years since, like, I've last seen her. And so we're talking for a bit, and she ends up like, oh my god, well, here's my number, text me anytime, call me. And I'm like, yes, okay. And so then she leaves, and I'm sitting there like still like kind of like cleaning my face off, and my store manager was just like, oh my god, Felicity, like go wash your face and just come back whenever you're ready. So I was just like, oh, okay. I'm like, oh, okay, that's sweet. So I go and I wash my face, and I'm like super happy, and I come back, and my store manager was just like, oh my god, like, who was that? I'm like, that was my aunt that I haven't seen in like years. I wasn't able to see her, and like I just kind of summarized like the situation, which I'll probably talk about a little bit later on. But like, anyway, so I was just like kind of explaining her the situation. She was like, oh, okay, that's so sweet. But just know that we're putting your name on the board. I'm like, that's random as freak. So I'm like, what board? And she's like, oh yeah, we have a crying board here. I'm like, a crying board? And she's like, yeah, like there's been a few times where customers are mad at us or something happens where one of us cries, so we have a crying board, and we like to keep a tally to see who's the biggest crybaby in the store. So you're gonna have your first tally on the board. And I'm like, what the freak? So then later on I go back there during my shift to look at it, and the person that has the most tallies on that board is the freaking store manager. So I'm just like, girl. And so even the coworkers were like, oh my god, that's kind of mean, like why are you gonna put Felicity's name up on the board? It wasn't anything like a customer made her mad or anything. It was just like a sentimental moment. And she's just like, I don't care, I don't want to lose. Like, girl, you dang near have like 50 tally marks on your, like, beside your name. You already lost. So I'm just like, what the heck? But then I didn't like that either, because I'm like, that's kind of like you opening a door up for like bullying or just an ugly environment. So I was just like, I don't like that. So then that kind of like bugged me for a bit. So I was just like, you know what, I don't want to be working alongside someone who, or a manager who's gonna be, you know, doing that to their employees. Because if she's doing that, like going back to like the Sonic thing, if she's doing that, then what makes you think she won't allow something else to happen, or if something goes down, then like, you know, like it's just something you don't want to be around, and nothing you want to, like, I don't know. I'm a super cautious person. Oh my god. I'm a super cautious person. So whenever I see something that like throws me off or I don't feel comfortable with, my first thing that I want to do is just like dip out of the situation or like get out of the environment, because I'm like, So yeah, that was my experience working at the Smell Good place at the age of 20, and I didn't like it. So I thought that place was super toxic. So yeah. From the beginning of 2021 to like the end of 2021, I started working for eye doctors. The first eye doctors that I stayed at, it was pretty chill, but then like my grandma had passed away during that time period, and I took it really hard. So emotionally, like I wasn't there. So I was just like, oh, you know, like I need to take a break and like time for myself, and also like I also need to get back in the groove of like getting my grades up in classes, because at the time I was failing. So I was like, no, my first priority needs to be school. So yeah. But anyway, so jumping into like the first eye place, I stayed there for a bit, or I explained that, sorry. So I ended up quitting at that first eye doctor's, and then I was just like, oh, like let me just work for like, you know, another eye doctor's, because that's a really good career path for the moment, and I could get like a, you know, like better pay instead of like me working in retail and stuff. So I was just like, oh, I'll just stick to like working at eye doctors, it's fine. So I ended up working for eye doctors in my town, and they were private. Oh my god, they were privately owned in the beginning. Like the owners, I mean the doctors were the owners, but then something happened where I think an insurance company had bought out that I had ended up I ended up buying the eye doctors from the doctors, and now it was like a chain, almost like a chain company, but only because of the insurance. I don't know how it worked, but at that point they had HR. And whenever eye doctors have a private owned, whenever doctors' offices are more private owned, they don't have an HR or anything. Your boss is the doctors because they're the owners. But since they got bought out by a chain, like kind of like chain company, they now have an HR, so you could go through the levels, and if something goes down, you can let them know. Anyway, so I was there, and the store manager, or like, I don't know what she was. She's been there for years, so I think she was like the one that was like billing everything and like keeping up with the money and stuff. And her personality, when I first had an interview, it stank real bad. So I was just like, I don't know if I'm gonna like her, but since I'm only gonna be selling glasses and she's in the back office, I don't have to be around her that often. And so I was just like, okay, whatever, I'll take the job, because I ended up getting hired. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So then I was getting trained, but they weren't really training me that well. And I didn't start really fully getting into actually like going through the process of like pricing out glasses and stuff with patients. So maybe like 2 months in, because it's a lot because you also have to bill it, so you have to be like really like specific on like everything. Anyway, so it was taking me a minute to like get everything and like learn everything, but the store manager was like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and like pushing the other manager that was training me to like hurry up and learn stuff. But yeah, she was always nitpicking. And there is a moment where there was no patients coming in at maybe, oh my god, there was no patients in at the time for like oh my god. So there's this one situation with the store manager that I didn't like. And I thought in the moment I was being a big person, but I was just like, looking back now, I'm just like, girl, why'd you do that? You should have just stayed. But anyway, so what had happened was there is a day where we only saw maybe like 5 patients in the morning, but in the afternoon both doctors were out. So all our time, or for the rest of the time at the office, all we did was play catch up. And so we ended up, all the optical people ended up catching up with everything, so everything was done. And so what we were doing was, oh my god, so what we were doing after we caught up with everything was just wipe down and clean everything and make sure everything was good. And after maybe like 2 hours, the whole office was clean, so there's really nothing else for us to really do. But we were still trying to find busy work, but as we were trying to find busy work, we were still like talking and everything. And so there is a moment where the store manager had came out from her dungeon, and she was just like, what are y'all doing? And so my manager, not the store manager, sorry. So my manager, that was like the lady that was training me, was just like, oh, we caught up with everything and this and that. She was just like, oh, okay. And so then she goes, so the store manager goes into her dungeon again, and we have like little phones around the area, so we could call different phones and someone else could pick it up, so we don't have to like go back and forth. And so the oh my god, the store manager ended up calling my manager, and my manager picks up. She's like, hello? Okay, bye. So she hangs up, and my manager's like, oh, well, so-and-so said that if we don't find anything to do, then if we don't find anything to do, one of y'all could just go home, because it just seems like y'all don't want to do anything. That's what she told me. And I'm just like, well, if that's the case, I could go home. And I wanted to go home anyways, but also I should have just stayed, because there was no reason for me to get all booty hurt about it. But I was just overwhelmed with that lady, because that lady was just, her whole energy around her was just so like exhausting to be around. So I didn't like her. So I was just like, like, okay, like I'll go home. I'll be the one to go home. So I ended up going home, and then the next day I come back and they're like, yeah, like so-and-so, the store manager was like looking for you and this and that, and she asked you why you left. And I'm like, oh my god, well girl, you're the one who said that one of us could leave. So I took the opportunity to bounce, because I wanted to go home. But yeah, I thought that was funny. But later on working there was this girl who got rehired. Well, she was a lady. So this lady had gotten rehired, and she was like in her 40s, and she was single, and she would always tell me and like my other coworkers about her dating life and how the dating apps are going, and how she's mostly attracted to military men, but how all these military men want money from her and to send them Google Play gift cards and stuff like that. So I'm just like, okay, that's weird. And so there's one time where we're all in the optical area, and we're like, I just got done finishing a patient, so I was like billing everything on the computer. And so that lady comes, she's like, oh my god, the guy that I'm talking to just sent me a weebie picture. And I'm like, what the heck? And so everybody in optical is like, girl, that was random ass heck. Like, what the heck? She's like, yeah, girl, and it's so big, look. And she goes and she flashes her phone and shows everybody the wee picture. And I'm like, I do not want to see this 45-year-old woman's wee pictures that she be receiving. Like, what the heck? That's disgusting. That's nasty. Like, that's gross. So I was just like, And so then I was just like, you know what? I don't want to be around here anymore. Like, the store manager be getting on my nerves. This lady, after that day, oh my goodness, so going back to that, after that day, that girl was always like boasting about how many wee pictures she gets in a day. She was always showing them to us, and I even told her one day, I was like, I really don't want to see it. She's like, why not, girl? You look, and she'd like put it in my face, or like I'll be sitting there doing something on the computer and she just like flash her phone in front of my face. So I'm like, okay, you know, like I already told you once. So then I ended up going and I quit and I reported her to corporate and stuff, but she's still there. But I ended up going and reporting her to corporate and stuff. And I ended up leaving because I was getting overwhelmed with that place. So I quit there. So yeah, that was my experience at the second eye place that I worked at. 2021 to 2022, I started working at another eye place after I quit that one, and I got hired and everything. And to begin with, like, that's where I got more of my optical experience, because I sold glasses before and that's all I did at the previous eye doctors that I worked at. But at this place, I was able to pre-test patients, like puff the air in the eye and let them look through the little machine to look at the little balloon and all that mess. So I was just like pre-testing patients before they saw the doctor. And so I was doing that for a few months, and then I ended up moving to the lab, and I actually learned how to cut lenses to fit into the frame. So I was like, oh shoot, I got lab experience. I work in a lab. I'm a science girl. So I was super excited about that. And yeah, so I had a lot of opportunity in that place. So if it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't be having the experiences and also the job opportunities that I have now. So I guess that's a bonus. But yeah, I appreciate that. But yeah, in the beginning of that place, the environment there was fun. Everybody was super nice. But a little bit later on, me working there, I had to call out of work a lot because my little brother at the time had kidney failure. And so in the moment, like in the beginning, it was super serious. So of course, like my parents would leave out of town and I would go with them because me and my little brother are like this. We're like super tight. And so I'm like, oh my god, like if it, like I don't care about a job at the moment, I want to focus on my little brother. So I would go with my parents all the time, back and forth to the town that like my little brother had to go and see his doctor at. And so there was like a few situations where it was super serious. So I would call off. I would be gone for like a week or so, and then my parents would drive me back so I could come back to work and everything. So yeah, but each time that I would call off, my little brother's doctor would actually write me a doctor's excuse and like write down, or like they would put down like the situation and stuff, because they did the same for my parents, but they also like, they're nice enough to like give me one too because I'm this, like whatever. So they're nice enough to give me like doctor's excuses. And every time I would go back to work, and I would update my boss and everything, like I would tell her what was going on, but she didn't really seem to care. But I would give her my letter. The first time I gave her the doctor's excuse, she said that she wasn't able to accept it because corporate said that the doctor's excuse wouldn't do anything for me. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's just like, oh, well, I looked at the handbook, and I also talked to HR, and they said that since your little brother isn't your son or your father or your mother or a grandparent, then that means it doesn't count. I was just like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, I hear your little brother isn't considered immediate family, so like doctor's excuses that you're bringing me won't do anything. And I'm like, what? He's not immediate family. He's literally my brother. We're like, what the heck? Like, we're like, what? Like, that's crazy. She was just like, yeah, so I can't accept your letters or anything. And I'm like, what the heck? And so then that was like, oh my god, sorry, I'm getting frustrated going back thinking about it. But so I was just like, what the, like, I got butthurt about that because I'm like, why? And so there's another situation where Hayden ended up having to go to the hospital again for a week, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to go regardless because I don't care. I need to go and make sure my little brother's okay. So I ended up going with my parents, and I was gone for a week, and I texted my boss ahead of time, and I was just I texted my boss and everything, and I was just like communicating with her and stuff, but she wasn't responding to any of my text messages and stuff. And I sent another doctor's excuse just in case, but she didn't acknowledge it. So then after that whole situation, I come back, and she's like, Felicity, we're gonna have to write you up. And I'm like, why? She's like, because you've been calling in a lot as also, and you do it to where like we get stuck, and I have to write you up because of it. And I'm like, oh my god. So I was just like, okay, I guess. But I didn't sign it. I was just like, okay. But then there was a moment where, oh my goodness. So yeah, so that whole, I got written up, and then I also got written up another time because my little brother again got sick again. And at that moment, I remember that day because it happened early in the morning, and Hayden almost went septic, and I was like super scared for him. So I was like, oh my god, like I need to be there with my little brother. Like this is serious, this is scary. And so I ended up going to the hospital with them, with my parents, and we're all there. And I text my boss, and I'm like, hey, you know, like I'm not able to come in today because Hayden's like in the emergency room right now because of this and that. So I just went into detail about the situation, and she ended up screenshotting my message that I sent her, and I guess she accidentally sent it back to me because I got back the screenshot of our text messages, and I was like, I bet you she was just trying to send it to her boss. So I texted her, I was like, hey, if you want to fire me, you could just fire me. And she's just like, well, you need to decide on if you want this job or not. And I'm like, you know what? I quit. So I quit, and I ended up staying with my little brother, and I was out of work for a few months because I was just making sure he was okay, because this is something like we've never like gone through, and like it's a whole like, you know, like having a really close like loved one go through something so like severe and scary. It's just like, oh my god, sorry, I'm about to cry. But yeah, so that job was whack because yeah, so it was that job sucked. So yeah, that place was really bad. So my last job I was working at an eye doctor's, which again, most eye doctors are super toxic to work at because of how small and how close everybody works along each other. And especially the people that have been like working there for a long time, they're mostly the drama starters there. That's what I've been noticing, you know. That's just my hypothesis. So this eye doctors, I was excited to work at because I had applied for a whole bunch of jobs while I was in Texas, and so whenever I came over here, I was like, oh, maybe, you know, something will work out to where I could just work here. And so again, I had applied back when I was in Texas, and then I moved down here, and they reached out to me again whenever I came down here, and they're like, hey, are you still interested in the job here? And I was like, heck yeah, I am. So I ended up going and working there, but in the beginning they had me shadow the opticians. So I was shadowing the opticians and stuff, and they're kind of asking me about like some stuff I know. I'm like, I kind of just know the basics because I came from commercial eye care places, not like privately owned place, like, you know, a privately owned office, because this place was a privately owned office. And I was like, I had somewhat experience with privately owned offices, but like, you know, I wasn't there long enough. I was honest with them. So they're like, oh, okay, I understand. I ended up going into the lobby area where all the glasses are, and like where I was gonna work at was in a lab. And so again, I was in the lobby area waiting for my boyfriend to come pick me up. And so we'll name this older lady. So she comes up to me, and she was just like, oh my god, like, how are you? Or like, what's your name? And I was just like, oh, I'm Felicity, I'm doing good with her. And so she was just like, oh, well, how do you like it here? Like, do you think you could, like, you know, like, you think you like it? And I'm like, yeah, it looks pretty cool. Like, I just need to learn, and like once I like learn everything, like get really into it, then I think everything's gonna fall together for me. And she was just like, yeah, it just takes time, it's super repetitive, whatever. So she seemed super nice in the beginning, but later on, after she talked to me, she went into the lab and she asked my boss and my old coworker, we'll name her Jennifer. She was just like, oh, what do you think about the new girl? Said that like super loud in the lab. I'm just sitting there like, they're already talking about me. I'm like, that's crazy. Oh, my boss was like, oh, you know, like, yeah, she came from Texas and everything, but she still has a lot of learning to do and this and that. And so then kind of asking more questions, and then like the responses my boss was giving were kind of negative. And I'm like, if you don't want me, or if you don't think I could, you know, like do the job, then why are you hiring me in the first place? But then too, maybe they just needed a body there. But still, I'm just like them being super catty, that rubbed me the wrong way, especially on my first day. I was just like, dang, I thought everything was good, but y'all are already like talking about me behind my back. And I'm like, right here? But my boss didn't know I was there, and Jennifer didn't know I was there. So I'm still sitting there in the lobby on my phone, and then and my old boss ended up walking out, and my old boss was like, oh my god, Felicity, I didn't know you were still in here. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm waiting for my boyfriend. Girl. So since then, I already knew it was gonna be bad. Yeah, so like while I was there, I was getting trained and everything, but of course, like when I'm getting trained, I ask a lot of questions and I have them kind of like double check me because I want to make sure I'm doing it right, of course. And I hate where if I mess up something, I already know how to like do double the work, and I'm like, I don't want to do all that. So I try my best to prevent as much as I can. So I would always ask them like, oh, am I supposed to do it this way? Or like, oh, okay, just a quick question. If I do this, I have to do it this way, right? Or if I do this, I have to do it this way. And then they would answer it. But then like a little bit later on, like I was still like, maybe like my second week there, I was still asking questions, and they both, my boss and Jennifer, ended up seeing oh my god, seeming like they're annoyed with me asking all those questions. So then since like when they're starting to get like that, I kind of was like, oh, okay, like I need to get a hold of this. Like I need to just, not second guess myself, because that was most of the things I was like messing up on. Like whenever I was second guess myself, I start messing up on everything. So I was like, I just won't do that. But it was hard, and so I would still later on ask questions. They would still get annoyed, and it was just an ongoing cycle. And so it got to the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna just figure it out, and then if I mess up, I can go back and fix it. So it got to the point where I still was not fully trained on how to like sell glasses or order glasses and stuff, and I'd always be messing up. My boss would always correct me, but it's like I would mess up and they'd be like, no, you do it this way and this way and this way, and then I'm like, okay, well, I think I just need more help in this area, and they're like, oh, okay, all right, and they leave it at that. And so whenever I would go to try to order and I'd ask questions again, they'd act annoyed. So I'm just like, dang, it's damned if I do, it's damned if I don't. So I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna just figure it out on my own. I wasn't even fully trained on everything. I was only trained on like selling and ordering glasses. They didn't even teach me how to like order contacts or anything. The reason was that selling contacts was like a whole different ball game, which I'm like, honestly, you can still train me, but if you see me struggling in this area, why won't y'all help me instead of like watching me fail? Or embarrass myself by like ordering lenses wrong for a patient and go back and I don't know. They weren't in my best interest, I guess. It was just bad. Which, I mean, they're not obligated to, but it's just like, we're all working together, we're all a team. You would think that, they'd be helping me out and stuff like that, but whatever, it is what it is. There's also times where a lot of like drama would happen. I was like the main girl that would always have beef with everybody. But towards the end, when I had quit, I had put in my 2 weeks, but I didn't finish out my 2 weeks, so I actually stayed a week and a half. But maybe like I think it was that same week that I put in my 2 weeks. The whole entire week I was just like, you know what, whatever. If something is like messed up or something, I'll try my best to fix it, but all in all, I'm about to leave, so it really don't matter. But when it came to like patients' glasses and stuff, I would make sure, because of course that's their money that they're paying. They're paying they're paying for their glasses. They're using their money to purchase those glasses, so it's my job to order everything correctly. So I would try my best to do it. And yeah, anyways, so there was a situation where it was a week before I put in my 2 weeks. I think this was the breaking point, because I was just like, you know what, I need to get out of this toxic, work environment. I'm tired of it here. All the girls here are really catty and they gossip too much, and it's just all negative here, and I don't like it. So it was that week. This was the breaking point, like I said. So there is a situation where a patient comes in for her appointment, and she had made an appointment for her husband. His appointment was at 4:00 and her appointment was at 4:30, and we took our last patient in at 4:30. And so they didn't end up showing up for their appointment till like 4:40, and the receptionist was like, oh ma'am, we can't see your husband because he's already late. And the wife was just like, what do you mean he's already late? And she was like, yeah, y'all's appointment, or his appointment was at 4 and your appointment was at 4:30, but we're still able to squeeze you in, but we just won't be able to see your husband, so we can reschedule him. And she was just like, how? When I scheduled it, I thought I scheduled it at 5, and she was just like going off, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so then the receptionist was just like, well, I'll go ahead and have let me double check with the techs to see if they could talk to the doctor, so maybe we could squeeze your husband in, but I know for a fact we could squeeze you in, but I'm not too sure about your husband, so we'll ask. So I ended up going and helping her, and I ended up asking the techs, and so two of the techs said not to see the husband, and then Trina was just like, actually no, we can. And I'm like, oh my god, please no, because if like in my head, I was like, if we see the husband, we're gonna be here until like 6 o'clock, and our office closes at like 5:30. So we're probably gonna be here till, oh my god. So I'm like, yeah, we'll probably be here till 6 o'clock, and I'm trying to go home. And at the time too, my nephew's soccer game was gonna, like, he was gonna play, and I was like, I want to make it, and it started at 6, and it takes me like 30 minutes just to get home. So I was just like, no, like, we need to leave. But yeah, anyways, Trina was like, yeah, we need to go. Trina was like, yeah, let me go ask the doctors. And so she convinced the doctors to see the husband. So both the husband and the wife ended up getting seen still, and me and the receptionist were pissed off because whenever patients have to stay later, we have to stay later because I'm the one that helps with the sales, and the receptionist checks out the patients. And so Trina does everything for the patient and like does like the pre-testing and stuff for the doctors. The doctors see him super quick, and he throws them, he throws the couple at us, or at me. So then the couple is looking at glasses for like a good like 40 minutes, and then they're making it a bigger issue about their insurance because they're like, I thought my insurance covers 100%. And I'm like, no, man. I'm like, the breakdown that we got from your insurance is this. So I'm explaining to both of them like what their allowance is and everything. And so she wasn't believing me. She's trying to go back and forth with me. I wasn't having it. I was being super short, and I was like, I can only repeat myself so much. So I was just like, okay, ma'am, this is the breakdown. This is what we pulled. But if you have any questions, or maybe it shows one thing on your end about your insurance and it shows on ours, it's best if you just call the insurance tomorrow and we can figure it all out tomorrow. And so she was just like, oh, okay. And so she's just scrolling on her phone, I guess, on the insurance website. But you get a lot more information when you call the insurance company. But of course the insurance company closes at 5, and at that time it was already 6:30. So I was just like, oh my god. So they're still just sitting there kind of like being a fool pretty much. And so then ended up getting her stuff, and she leaves me and the receptionist there alone with those patients. And I'm like, girl, you're the one that convinced the doctors to see them, but you still want to leave? That's messed up. So then we didn't leave the office till like 6:40, I think, me and the receptionist. So we were both mad. So we get home, and while I was driving home, I was on the phone with her, and she was going off, I was going off, like we were both upset, mad. And so then the next week, something had happened where one of the doctors was taking too long with seeing all the patients, so he was behind. The patient had came back out at like 4:50, and so Trina ended up being at the receptionist desk, which her job was a tech, but she was at the receptionist desk because I think that one of the doctors had asked her to help the receptionist out with something. So she was like, yeah, I'll do it. And so then she was just sitting up there. And the patient comes out, and she's trying to check the patient out, and I was hearing the conversation. The patient didn't sound like he wanted to buy glasses, so I was just like, oh, okay, well, he doesn't need me. And I had already put in my 2 weeks at that time, so I was just like, I'm gonna just leave, because what are they gonna do if I leave? Fire me? I don't care, I'm leaving anyways, But so I had grabbed myself. It was already 5:30. Oh no, it was like 5:40, so I had already grabbed myself. I waited long enough. Grabbed myself, clock out, and I'm walking out. I was like, okay, bye, y'all. Y'all have a good night. And it was the receptionist and Trina in the front. And the receptionist was just like, oh, bye, girl. Have a good night. And I was like, bye. And, wait, Felicity, do you know how to price out contacts? And I was like, no, which I knew how to price out contacts. But I just don't know how to order them because I wasn't trained to order them. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to leave. So I was just like, no, I don't. And I kept walking. I left. And so then I'm driving home, and then I get a call from the receptionist. I'm like, oh, what the heck? I was like, hello. She's just like, you know what did? And I was like, oh, God. I was like, what happened? She's just like, well, she's over here trying to do all this extra stuff when checking out a patient. It isn't even that hard. She's making it harder for herself. And I tried to step in and ask if she needed help, or trying to show her a better way to like print out a prescription, because I think the patient had asked for their prescription, and all you do is like print it out, give it to them. But she wanted to print it out, scan it into our system, and then give it to him, when we could just print out a whole bunch of multiple copies if we need to. And we already have his prescription in the computer, so why do we need to scan it in? Don't make no sense. So Trina was the receptionist was pretty much like stepping in like, hey, like you don't have to do it like that. You could just do it like this. And Trina's like, well, why don't you do it then? And so then the receptionist is like, okay. And so then she prints out the prescription, gives it to the patient, and she ends up just leaving Trina by herself with that patient. And so yeah, so I'm just like, dang, like, what the heck, that's crazy, because she did that to us, remember? She was like, yeah, she did do that to us. And so we're just like, dang, that's crazy. The next day comes, I'm there talking to the receptionist for a bit, and there, she looks at me kind of funky, she looks at the receptionist kind of funky, she walks into the lab, because I know she was going to go in there and talk to Jennifer about, like, the situation. So Jennifer ends up coming in, and she goes into the lab, and I'm still in the front talking to the receptionist. And so Trina's in there, and they're talking for a bit. And I'm like, oh, let me just go and start doing my job, whatever. So I go inside the lab, and I'm there. And she's like, oh, yeah, and Felicity over here, let me hang in with the patient. And I was just like, what do you mean? She's just like, yeah, you left me hanging. Like, I was here with the patient till like 6:15. I was like, okay. And she's just like, yeah, so like, why did you leave? And I was like, well, first of all, he didn't want to buy any glasses, it sounded like, so that's why I decided to leave. And also, I am scheduled to work here until 5:30, so when 5:30 hits, it's my right to go home. So then she leaves, and I think she tries to confront the receptionist about the situation, but the receptionist was more like, she was more stern and more aggressive with it. And so she tried to be all ugly towards the receptionist wasn't having it, so then left or whatever. So I was just like, what the heck, like, how is she gonna get butthurt at something that she did to us? Even though, you know, like, two rights don't make a wrong, but still, it's like, why are you getting butthurt because you did the same thing to us? So what the heck, like, why is it a big issue? Clearly it wasn't an issue for you whenever you left us hanging, but whenever we do it to you, it's a problem. That's crazy. So yeah, I was just like, So then when that whole time happened, I was just like, yeah, no, I don't feel like I need to come back. So I ended up telling the doctors that, you know, today was like that Wednesday was my last day, so I quit. So then the next day I go and I grab my stuff, and then that was it. That was my last, I guess, like, time visiting there or whatever. And then a week after, the receptionist calls me. She's just like, girl, you were the talk of the day. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? She's just like, yeah, going around trying to, like, tell a story that's not even true. I was like, what do you mean? She was like, yeah, like, she tried telling me, or the reason why you quit was because of her. I'm just like, oh my god, I quit because of, like, most of the people there, and also, like, I wasn't happy there. But anyways, who cares? Anyways, so she's just like, yeah, saying that you left because of her, and that you're mad at her because she had asked you to price out contacts, and you stormed out, and this and that. And I was like, that is not what happened. She's like, yeah, I know that's not what happened. I was there when it happened. But how she told us was that you were mad at her because she had asked you to price out contacts. You said no, and that you leave at 5:30. And so that's why you left, and that you gave her attitude. And oh my gosh. And she said, but then I butted in and told her that's not what happened. And I was like, really? You said something? She's like, yeah, because that's not what happened. I told her that I was there when the whole situation happened. You just told us bye, and that was it. You weren't storming out with an attitude or anything like that. And that was like, oh yeah, you know, like, she did that whenever you left. To, like, the receptionist saying that, you know, I gave her attitude when the receptionist left. And the receptionist like, how could she do that if she left before I did? I left a few minutes after she did. That is not what happened. So I was trying to make a front in front of all the people in the office, I guess, because they're all just talking. Well, girl, you know you lying. Not everything got to be about you. And then also I heard, now that I quit, I've been out of that office for, I think it officially 2 weeks now. And what I've heard was that all the glasses orders that are being messed up with the patients, like if the patients don't have any type of, like, coatings on the lenses and stuff, like, they come back wrong, that my old boss and going back and blaming me for messing up the orders. So they tell the patients like, oh yeah, you know, the lady who had ordered your glasses is no longer here and she messed up on it, so we'll be able to fix it for you. So they over here blaming me, and I'm like, why the heck are you still gonna be talking about me whenever I'm not there? It's already been 2 weeks. Leave my name out your mouth, please. If y'all are watching this, please keep my name out your mouth. Thank you. But yeah, that was like the last toxic place I worked for. I'm in a better environment now, in a better headspace as well. I feel like my mood's changed a lot more. I'm more, like, level-headed now than I was before. And yeah, so overall, I hope y'all enjoyed my video. I know it's been a month since I last posted. I'm sorry. it's just that whole month was like the whole situation with that doctors, plus my mental stuff just whacking out of like just going crazy or whatever. So excuses, sorry. But yeah, again, I hope y'all like my video. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on my socials. I put them down below. And if y'all have any like video ideas y'all want me to do, please type them down below and see what I can do for y'all. I'll probably do them for y'all anyway. So yeah, overall, again, thank y'all for watching. I hope y'all have a good rest of the week, sending positive vibes your way, and yeah, bye.